Undercover Boss saw chef frying chicken at 4 a.m., then discovered the secret that changed everything. Sometimes, the greatest battles for integrity are fought in the quietest kitchens, long before the world wakes up. Under the dim neon lights of the Golden Bucket signboard, a middle-aged man with graying hair and a patchy beard slowly pushed open the door of Branch 37. His wrinkled shirt, thick-rimmed glasses, and an old baseball cap nearly concealed his face. No one knew that this quiet man was none other than Lau Parker, the CEO and founder of the Golden Bucket Fried Chicken Empire. He wasn't there basking in the glory of power, but rather driven by a deep yearning to rediscover what he once took pride in, a brand built on quality and trust. But from his very first steps inside, Lau sensed something was wrong. The familiar scent of fried chicken, the aroma that once captured the hearts of millions, now felt strange. Something was off, very off. Sitting quietly in a corner, he ordered a portion of the Golden Signature fried chicken, the dish that had once been the pride of the brand. But the moment the first bite touched his tongue, Lau froze. The crispy skin was burnt, and the meat inside was still cold and damp, a contradiction that was absolutely unacceptable in the rigorous standards he had once established. Discreetly, he spat the meat into a napkin, his sharp eyes carefully observing every movement behind the kitchen counter. A small family sitting nearby also couldn't hide their disappointment. The children pushed their plates aside, their eyes filled with dismay. The exhausted mother sighed and quietly approached the counter to request a refund. What shocked Lau even more was the cashier's response, cold, mechanical, entirely unfazed, as if this had become an everyday occurrence. Lau pulled out his old phone from his shirt pocket, opened his notes app, and quickly typed, Branch 37, catastrophic quality. Third time this quarter, same exact scenario. Outside, twilight settled, and the cold early season winds swept past the fogged-up glass windows. But the coldest thing at that moment wasn't the weather. It was the rising doubt within the heart of the founder. Branch 37, once hailed as the impregnable fortress of Golden Bucket, a model for all other stores to follow, was now suffering a severe revenue decline. Those numbers on the financial reports weren't just data to Lau. They were a wake-up call. But what exactly had happened? Where did this downfall begin? And most importantly, who was behind it all? A fierce urge welled up inside him. It was time to leave behind the lavish executive office, shed the trappings of power, and face the truth hidden beneath the glittering surface of the empire he had built with his own hands. Disguised as a food blogger searching for material on the decline of fast food culture, Lau Parker continued to visit Branch 37 every day as if intentionally exposing it. But within him, every careful observation brought a rising tension, because everything he saw bore the marks of a hidden crisis. On the kitchen shelves that should have been neat and spotless, he saw ingredient boxes with smudged labels, many of them not matching the batch codes set by Golden Bucket's strict standards. The new batch of chicken looked soggier than usual, the meat fibers seemingly devoid of elasticity. The bags of breading no longer displayed the clear logo of the contracted supplier. Stranger still, every time a delivery truck arrived, the delivery person never entered through the main entrance, but slipped in quietly through the back door, where the security cameras were conveniently under maintenance. Tyler Stevens, the branch manager, was a young man with a perpetually haggard face, his eyes deeply sunken from chronic lack of sleep. He seemed to be present at almost every hour of the day. Lau observed how Tyler constantly tried to motivate the staff, correcting their techniques and smoothly handling customer complaints, but it was painfully clear that Tyler was fighting a losing battle. It was as if every time he patched one hole, another tore open right behind him. Yet amidst that crumbling system, there was one person who caught Lau's attention from the very first day: Marcus Kane, a kitchen worker with a solid build, calloused yet incredibly deft hands. Unlike the other employees who just wanted to get through their shifts, Marcus had a peculiar habit. He meticulously inspected every piece of chicken, carefully checked oil temperatures, and even adjusted the fryer settings to exact degrees unnoticed by others. Lau silently noted, Marcus Kane carefully observes brand labels on supply boxes before opening, checks batter thickness, writes notes in a personal notebook, not a company log, acts discreetly to avoid Tyler's attention. On the third night, as darkness settled, Lau accidentally discovered Marcus lingering long after his shift had ended. A faint light still shone from the back kitchen, and through a narrow gap in the door, Lau saw Marcus quietly measuring oil temperatures with a sophisticated personal device far superior to the company's standard equipment. Marcus fried a very small test batch, just a few pieces, then meticulously cut into each one, taking detailed notes in a worn, leather-bound notebook. But what left Lau stunned was what happened next. Marcus carefully gathered the perfectly cooked pieces, the batch that seemed far superior to the chicken sold throughout the day, and threw them straight into the trash, an utterly irrational act, but one that was anything but random. In that moment, Lau knew for certain Marcus Kane was not just a chef trying to improve a recipe. He was investigating something, and perhaps he was also searching for the truth, just like Lau Parker himself. A secret was beginning to crack open, and tonight, beneath the cloak of normalcy, Golden Bucket was hiding a storm bigger than Lau had ever imagined. He silently wondered, could Marcus be the key to unlocking the truth? Or was he just another lost soul caught in the spiral of this failing system? Under the damp early morning fog, while the entire city still slept, Lau Parker sat quietly in his old sedan parked just a few dozen meters from the rear entrance of Branch 37. The digital clock on the dashboard blinked 3:58 IEMM. He exhaled slowly, his eyes fixed on the metal door behind the kitchen, where at this hour, there should have been nothing but a locked security system and silence. But then, as if watching a carefully orchestrated play, the familiar figure of Marcus Kane appeared. He was no longer wearing the Golden Bucket uniform, but a faded brown jacket and a cap pulled low, hiding half his face. Marcus glanced around cautiously, then pulled out a personal key, inserted it into the rear door lock, and disappeared inside. Lau frowned. At this hour, what could he possibly be doing in there? Without hesitation, Lau quietly stepped out of his car and approached the restaurant's side entrance. Decades of experience as a company founder had honed his patience and vigilance. Through the fogged-up glass window, he saw a faint light flickering on in the kitchen, and then a scene that made Lau's heart stop. Under the cold neon lights, Marcus Kane laid out an array of advanced measuring instruments, a digital scale, a precision oil temperature gauge, and a device for testing the moisture content of the batter. None of this resembled any quality control procedure Lau had ever trained his staff to perform. Marcus pulled out a cardboard box filled with chicken supplies. Each piece of meat was meticulously inspected under the harsh lights. He stretched the chicken skin, carefully examining the texture of the meat fibers. His eyes narrowed as he reviewed the labels. Lau could tell immediately these shipments were substandard, possibly even relabeled with fake tag, and then the testing began. Marcus carefully lowered each piece of chicken into the fryer, adjusting the oil temperature according to the detailed specifications he'd been noting in his worn leather notebook. Every action was executed with absolute precision. Frying times were measured down to the second, oil temperatures adjusted by as little as 0.5 degrees, and even the resting time for the battered chicken before frying was timed exactly to 7 minutes. Once the cooking was complete, Marcus didn't take a single bite. Instead, he cut each piece open, recorded the internal doneness, examined the meat texture under the light, and took close-up photos of every angle. All the data was logged meticulously into a different notebook, a thick, red, leather-bound journal, marked with coded symbols, identifying each batch. And then, as if none of the testing had ever happened, Marcus gathered the perfectly prepared chicken pieces and threw them straight into the industrial trash bin. Lau Parker stood frozen in the shadows. This was not a chef casually trying to improve a recipe. This was someone quietly investigating a conspiracy and systematically gathering evidence. And with the sharp intuition that had once helped him build Golden Bucket from nothing to the pinnacle of the culinary world, Lau knew exactly who was behind it all: Derek Henderson, the regional director. A man Lau had long heard whispers about, known as the right-hand man of some rather unsavory, shadowy interests within the company. Henderson had long been infamous for his so-called profit optimization solutions, cutting costs at all costs, regardless of the consequences. But this wasn't just about ingredient fraud anymore. What Marcus was doing resembled the work of a forensic investigator, collecting evidence to confront a far more powerful and sophisticated force. At that moment, Lau realized this was no longer just a matter of food quality. It was a battle to protect the very soul of Golden Bucket, something he had taken his eyes off, nearly allowing it to be buried under ambition and greed. And Lau Parker also knew he could no longer stand on the sidelines for even one more second. Under the dim light of a foggy Seattle morning, Lau stood at the highest floor of Golden Bucket's headquarters, quietly observing the city through the cold glass window. In his hands was a thick, confidential file, marked Top Secret. Its contents weren't just numbers. They were living proof of a sophisticated underground network, slowly corroding the empire he had spent over 3 decades building. They're not just committing ingredient fraud, they're manipulating the very destiny of Golden Bucket, said Sophia Chin, executive vice president and Lau's most trusted longtime ally, her voice low and contemplative as they reviewed the reports together. Somehow, under the guise of restructuring, Henderson and Vince Harmon, a veteran regional director, had created a network of shell companies under the name Nexus Holdings, registered all the way in the Cayman Islands. Their scheme seemed simple on the surface, but was, in reality, devastatingly ruthless. Step 1. Change suppliers. Introduce lower quality ingredients to degrade product quality at key prime location branches. Step 2. When customer backlash and sales decline followed, the middle management team would sanitize reports, listing these once golden goose branches as underperforming assets, slated for closure. Step 3. Once forced to shut down, the assets would be sold off at bargain prices. And the buyers? Always unfamiliar names. Yet every financial trail ultimately led back to Nexus Holdings. Sophia pointed at the complex web of relationships displayed on the large conference room screen. Michael, look at this. The financial transactions, the hidden shareholder records, everything matches. Nexus Holdings is the vessel that legitimizes this entire operation. And Harmon, he's not just a pawn, he's directly profiting from all of this. Lau clenched the thick file tightly, his eyes glinting with the rare, long-suppressed fury. They're not just stealing money, they're stealing trust. And that is unforgivable. Without hesitation, Lau sprang into action. He instructed Sophia and the legal team to prepare a complete internal indictment backed by indisputable evidence, the financial transaction reports showing money transfers directly to Vince Harmon's personal accounts. Henderson had long been infamous for his so-called profit optimization solutions, slashing costs at any price, regardless of the consequences. But this wasn't just a simple case of ingredient fraud. What Marcus was doing resembled that of a scientific investigator, meticulously gathering evidence to confront a far more powerful and sophisticated force. At that very moment, Lau realized this was no longer about food quality. This was a fight to protect the soul of Golden Bucket, something he himself had lost sight of, almost letting it be buried under ambition and greed. And Lau Parker knew he couldn't stand on the sidelines for even one more second. Under the dim light of a foggy Seattle morning, Lau Parker stood at the top floor of Golden Bucket's headquarters, quietly gazing at the city through the icy cold glass. In his hands was a thick, confidential dossier, marked Top Secret. But inside wasn't just a collection of numbers. It was living proof of a sophisticated underground network eroding the very empire he had spent over 3 decades building. They're not just committing ingredient fraud, they're manipulating the entire fate of Golden Bucket, said Sophia Chin, the executive vice president and Lau's longest-standing ally, her voice heavy as they reviewed the reports together. Somehow, Under the pretense of corporate restructuring, Henderson and Vince Harmon, a veteran regional director, had built a network of shell companies called Nexus Holdings, registered all the way in the Cayman Islands. Their scheme seemed simple on the surface, but it was ruthlessly calculated. Step 1. Change supply chains, introducing low-quality ingredients to quietly degrade product standards at flagship locations. Step 2. As customer backlash mounted and revenue declined, middle management would sanitize the reports, turning once golden goose branches into so-called underperforming assets slated for closure. Step 3. After being forced to shut down, the assets would be sold off at bargain prices, and the buyers? Always unfamiliar names, but every financial trail inevitably led back to Nexus Holdings. Sophia pointed at the complex relationship diagram displayed on the large conference screen. Michael, look here. The financial transactions, the records of anonymous shareholders, everything matches. Nexus Holdings is the legal front for all of these shady deals. And Harmon, he's not just a pawn in all this, he's directly profiting from it. Lau clenched the thick dossier in his hands, his eyes burning with a fury he hadn't felt in years. They're not just stealing money, they're stealing trust. And that is unforgivable. Without hesitation, Lau took action. He instructed Sophia and the legal team to prepare a comprehensive internal indictment, backed by undeniable evidence. Financial reports detailing the transfer of funds directly into Vince Harmon's personal accounts. The door creaked open from the back. 2 security officers in formal uniforms entered and stood at attention, awaiting orders. Lau Parker adjusted the button on his vest, his eyes scanning the entire room. I did not build Golden Bucket to watch it rot into this disgrace. Starting today, Golden Bucket will return to the values I founded it on: transparency, integrity, and fairness. Those who wish to stand with me, I welcome you. For those who don't, that door remains open. Applause broke out, hesitant at first, but then spreading across the room. In the eyes of the younger leaders, the branch managers who had truly dedicated themselves to this company, there was admiration and, more importantly, hope. And at that moment, Lau Parker knew he hadn't just restored the soul of Golden Bucket. He had reignited the flame of justice in the hearts of good people. The lights in the boardroom dimmed, leaving only the glow of a massive LED screen to illuminate the space. The tension was palpable. Regional directors, vice presidents, and top executives of Golden Bucket sat in silence. Everyone thought this was just another routine financial review, until the name Nexus Holdings appeared on the screen, accompanied by its faint but chilling logo. Michael Carter, wearing a flawlessly tailored gray suit, stood tall before the screen. Without the need for a microphone, his voice carried through the room, deep and unwavering with each word. Do you know why the very branches that once held up Golden Bucket have fallen into ruin over the past year? Because right here, in this very room, some have sold the company's honor for their own profit, trading it for the disappointment of our customers and the exhaustion of our employees. He signaled to Sophia Chin. On the screen, a covertly recorded video played, filmed in a private hotel conference room. Vince Harmon's unmistakable voice echoed across the boardroom. Force them to keep buying the cheap batches, tank the quality, and close the shops legally. That way the prime real estate will easily fall right into Nexus Holdings' hands. The room froze in stunned silence. All eyes turned sharply toward Vince Harmon. His face turned pale. Beads of sweat ran down his temples, and his hands trembled as Michael Carter calmly placed a silver USB drive onto the table. This is the proof. Michael's voice dropped, but his authority filled every corner of the room. There's not just a video. Here is an independent lab report proving the low-grade supplies you pushed down to our branches failed quality standards. And this, he flipped open the next section of the folder, revealing printed emails and direct bank transfer receipts from Nexus Holdings to Harmon's personal accounts. Now, Mr. Harmon, do you have anything left to deny? The room fell completely silent. Vince Harmon collapsed back into his chair, his collar soaked with sweat. His voice cracked and faltered as he stammered, "Fine, I admit it. But I'm not the only one. Derek Henderson also." Michael raised a hand, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. "No more finger-pointing, Harmon. The police are already here." At that moment, the boardroom doors swung open. Two uniformed officers entered, moving silently toward Harmon. The room erupted in hushed whispers and gasps. Shocked glances darted around as if everyone wondered who would be next. Michael Carter scanned the room, his eyes sharp and unrelenting. "From this day forward, Golden Bucket returns to the values I built it on: quality and honor, and let me emphasize, these are not commodities anyone in this room has the right to sell." Applause broke out, loud and decisive. Sophia Chin stepped forward, her voice clear and authoritative. "I hereby announce, all managers connected to this case are immediately suspended. All records have been handed over to the authorities for criminal investigation." Michael buttoned his suit jacket and walked slowly toward the door. But before leaving, he paused, turned back, and delivered his final words. "This empire was built on sweat, honor, and justice. If anyone still wishes to walk the wrong path, be my guest. But remember, this time, I'll be standing right behind the door you think no one is watching." The boardroom doors closed behind him, leaving a profound silence and a mixture of fear, awe, and respect. The golden-plated clock on the wall struck 10 a.m. The grand boardroom at Golden Bucket's headquarters, a room that once hosted only formal signing ceremonies, had become a battlefield. Michael Carter stood firmly at the center of the room, without a podium or even a sheet of paper. All he needed was his unwavering resolve and a small silver USB glinting under the chandelier's light. "Today we're not here to talk about profit, we're here to talk about honor." His eyes locked onto the faces of those once considered the pillars of the company. On the massive screen behind him, a single chilling phrase appeared: "Nexus Holdings, the shadow behind the collapse." Sophia Chin immediately played a secretly recorded video from a private meeting at the Four Seasons Hotel. Vince Harmon's voice echoed throughout the room, as clear as if he were confessing in person. "The plan forward, lower the ingredient standards, let the branches collapse on their own. Then Nexus Holdings moves in and picks them up for pennies. Just sign off and you'll all get your cut." The hall went completely silent. Every eye turned toward Vince Harmon, seated in the front row. His face had gone pale, his lips trembled, and his fingers kept nervously twisting the silver ring on his left ring finger. Michael walked toward him, step by deliberate step, each movement like a hammer blow to the crumbling confidence of a man who once held the power of an entire region in his hands. "Harmon," Michael's voice dropped low, sharp as a knife. His eyes bore into Vince. "I'm giving you one final chance to stand up and explain yourself. Not to me, but to your own conscience. If there's anything left of it." No one dared breathe. The silence stretched, suffocating. Then, under the unbearable weight of it all, Vince shot up from his chair, his voice shaking, no longer able to deny what had become undeniable. I only followed orders. The mastermind, it was Derek Henderson. I just took commissions. I didn't what, Harmon?" Michael interrupted, his tone as hard as steel. "You signed off on those substandard shipments, letting children eat meals that wouldn't even pass basic safety standards. You slashed salaries, forced the best people to quit, and called it strategic restructuring for the good of the company." "The good of the company, or the good of your personal accounts?" Sophia Chin displayed another round of evidence. Emails, messages, financial records of transactions between Harmon and the shell company Nexus Holdings. At that moment, there was a knock at the door. A group of plainclothes police officers entered the room. The lead officer approached, holding out an arrest warrant. "Vince Harmon, you are under arrest for abuse of power, corporate corruption, and destruction of company assets. Please come with us." Vince stood frozen as if turned to stone. Those seated nearby pulled away, avoiding his eyes. Ashamed, disgusted, Michael turned toward the remaining executives, his piercing gaze cutting straight through them. Golden Bucket wasn't built on backroom deals made in the shadows. It was built on sweat, on sleepless nights by people like Marcus Kane, who spent every precious second at the Friars, not to chase profit, but to protect the honor of his craft. From this day forward, Golden Bucket will return to the values I founded it on: quality and honor, two things no one has the right to trade. No one. That declaration didn't just echo through the boardroom. It was broadcast live across every Golden Bucket branch, streaming directly to every employee screen. Michael buttoned his suit jacket and quietly left the boardroom as Sophia Chin announced the mass dismissals. Faces filled with shock, heads bowed low, and amidst it all, soft sighs of relief came from those who had managed to keep their integrity intact. Outside headquarters, heavy rain poured down, but to Michael Carter, this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a cleansing storm, washing away everything that had tainted the dream he had painstakingly built. 3 months after the largest purge in Golden Bucket's history, the company headquarters was no longer filled with smug laughter. Instead, it buzzed with vibrant discussions and fresh ideas. Michael Carter, now in a simple suit, no longer appeared surrounded by a swarm of aides. He quietly stopped by each department, listening intently. The people who once avoided his gaze now stood to greet him with genuine respect, not because he held the title of CEO, but because he had done what no one else dared to do: restore the honor of Golden Bucket, rebuilding the system through action, not empty promises. A new training program launched called the Golden Standard, a gold benchmark for professional ethics and product quality. Every employee, from head chefs to interns, participated. No more shallow lessons on paper. Instead, hands-on workshops took place right at the front lines, in the very kitchens where sweat was shed and honor reclaimed. The supply chain was now tightly monitored through blockchain technology. Every shipment, from chickens to the smallest spices, carried a digital fingerprint that couldn't be altered. Each branch could trace ingredient origins down to the minute of delivery. Michael called it transparency, not just on paper, but deep in the hearts of our people. The trust but verify policy became the new guiding principle. Trust was rekindled, but it would no longer be something exploited. Branches were encouraged to innovate, but surprise inspections, anonymous surveys, and most importantly, the right of every employee, whether at the fryer or the cashier counter, to speak up became standard practice. And the person who opened the first door to this new journey was none other than Marcus Kane. When Marcus was officially appointed as Regional Director of Product Quality, it wasn't a grand ceremony in some luxurious hall. It was a small, heartfelt gathering held at Store No. 37, the very heart of the former crisis, now transformed into the Golden Bucket Center for Innovation and Quality Improvement. The special guest that day was none other than Jenny Castro, the former manager who had been forced to resign for daring to speak out. She returned as a senior advisor, her reputation fully restored and compensated accordingly. Marcus stood before the brand new sign, Golden Bucket Innovation Center for Honest Quality. He held the microphone, his voice deep but steady. "I once stood here at 4 a.m., alone in the dark, with nothing but a digital scale and a battered notebook. Back then, I thought I was fighting a solitary battle. But today, I realize, if you don't give up, justice will never turn its back on you." On the small stage, Michael Carter quietly observed the man who had once worn an apron, now standing as a living symbol of resilience. His eyes softened, then shone with unwavering determination. "Sometimes," Michael's voice echoed across the room, his gaze falling upon the hopeful faces before him, "you must be willing to lose everything, just to remember why you started." That day, Golden Bucket didn't just open a new chapter for the brand. It opened doors that had long been shut within the hearts of so many people. And in the kitchen of Store No. 37, the familiar crisp aroma of fried chicken filled the air. But this time, it wasn't just the scent of success. It was the fragrance of a promise kept. The late afternoon sun stretched across the freshly mounted storefront sign, the Golden Bucket Innovation Center for Honest Quality. A cool breeze rustled gently through the gleaming glass windows. Inside, Marcus Kane stood silently, hands resting on the window frame, watching as people still lined up outside long after closing time. His eyes gleamed with pride, but behind them, a hint of reflection remained. Michael Carter quietly stepped up beside him, standing without a word, arms folded, His eyes followed the same direction as Marcus's, sharp and experienced. The eyes of a man who had once stood at the peak of glory, fallen into the depths of despair, and now stood tall once again through his own resilience and unwavering belief. "Do you remember that night?" Michael asked softly, almost as if he was asking himself. "When I sat at that last table in the far left corner of this restaurant?" Marcus nodded gently. "I'll never forget, sir. It was a rainy night, just like this one, and right at that exact moment, 4 a.m., Michael smiled faintly, adjusting the slightly frayed cuff of his sleeve. Small details he no longer cared about after everything that had happened. "That night, I saw a man, not just a chef, but a warrior, fighting in silence for a belief that had been trampled without mercy." Marcus looked down at his calloused hands, the faded burn scars tracing across skin, long accustomed to boiling oil and open flames. "Back then I thought I was just fighting to hold on to my pride." He paused, his voice soft, but weighted with meaning. "But in the end, what I was really protecting was the dignity of an entire generation of employees. People like Jenny, people like who I once was, dismissed for nothing more than an imperfect past." Michael held his gaze, eyes steady and voice deep, as if anchoring the moment. "You know something, Marcus?" he said, quietly. "I used to believe this company survived because of its secret recipes, its walnut-paneled boardrooms, or billion-dollar advisory teams. But it turns out what really keeps it alive is people like you." Michael rested a firm hand on Marcus's shoulder, his eyes reflecting an unwavering belief. That very night, Michael signed off on a groundbreaking new policy. Every Golden Bucket branch nationwide would establish a mini innovation center where employees could directly experiment, refine products, and share ideas freely without wading through layers of management. And for the first time in the company's history, a new manifesto was issued. "We don't just sell products, we preserve dignity in every dish we serve." Marcus left the Innovation Center just as the clock struck 4 a.m. He paused at the top of the steps, inhaling deeply as the dawn fog settled over the quiet streets. In the distance, Michael Carter stood by an old sedan, alone. No chauffeur, no... Michael lowered the window, his eyes warm with purpose. "Let's go, Marcus. We've got 2,000 more stores waiting for their lights to come back on." Marcus smiled, slipping into the passenger seat, his hand still tightly clutching the newly minted badge. "Regional Director, Quality is Honor." Outside the windshield, the Golden Bucket sign gleamed under the streetlights. To the east, the sky blushed with the first light of dawn. A new day had begun, and at long last, Golden Bucket had found its way home.